Most people believe that unstoppable people are made of different material, that they were born with something others weren't, that they feel less fear, doubt less, struggle less, that somewhere along the way they received a gift that the rest of us simply didn't get. And that belief is comfortable, because if being unstoppable is something you're born with, then not being it is not your fault. It is just the hand you were dealt. But that belief is completely wrong. And deep down, you already know it. Because you have seen people with every advantage imaginable, talent, resources, support, opportunity, who built nothing that lasted. And you have seen people with none of those things. People who started with nothing, who faced resistance at every turn, who had every reasonable excuse to quit, who became something nobody expected them to become. The difference was never what they had. It was what they decided. Specifically, what they decided to do with their mind when everything in them wanted to stop. James Allen wrote that a man's mind may be likened to a garden, which may be intelligently cultivated or allowed to run wild. And what he understood was that the mind is not a fixed thing. It is not something you inherit and carry unchanged for the rest of your life. It is something you build, or something you allow to build itself. And if you allow it to build itself, if you never deliberately choose what gets planted and what gets removed, it will grow whatever the environment around it produces by default. Fear, doubt, the path of least resistance, the comfortable story about why things are the way they are and why there's not much you can do about it. But if you cultivate it deliberately, if you decide what grows there and what is not, if you tend it with the same intentionality that anything worth having requires, it becomes something else entirely. Something that does not break under pressure. Something that does not negotiate with excuses. Something that keeps moving not because the conditions are right, but because the decision was made and the decision does not change based on how you feel today. That is what an unstoppable mind looks like. Not fearless, not without doubt, not untouched by difficulty. Just decided. And that decision, made once and then remade every single day in the small moments nobody sees, is what everything else is built on. Now let's talk about the distinction that changes everything. Because there are two types of people in any situation that requires sustained effort. And the difference between them is not talent, not intelligence, not the size of their dreams or the quality of their plan. It is one thing, whether they act according to how they feel or according to what they decided. The first type wakes up and checks in with themselves before they do anything. Do I feel like it today? Am I motivated? Do I have the energy? And if the answer is yes, they move. And if the answer is no, they negotiate. They tell themselves they will make up for it tomorrow, that one day does not matter, that they have been working hard and deserve a break, that the conditions will be better later and it makes more sense to wait. In those negotiations, each of them individually reasonable, each of them with a logical justification that sounds almost like wisdom, accumulate. They become the pattern, and the pattern becomes the life. The second type wakes up and does not check in with themselves first. Not because they do not have feelings. They have the same feelings as everyone else. But because they made a decision at some point that the feelings are not in charge. They feel the resistance and move anyway. They feel the doubt and act anyway. They feel the weight of the day before it has even started and show up anyway. Because the decision was made, and the decision is not contingent on the emotional weather of any given morning. James Allen wrote that the will to do springs from the knowledge that we can do. And what he understood was that this knowledge does not come from feeling ready. It comes from having acted when you were not ready and surviving it, and discovering that you were more capable than the feeling of unreadiness suggested. There was a man named Thomas. He had been trying to build something for 3 years, and for 3 years the pattern was the same. Strong start, genuine momentum, and then a difficult week, a loss of energy, a stretch where nothing seemed to move, and the feelings would come in and negotiate the commitment down to something more manageable. He was not lazy, he cared deeply, but he had been running his effort on motivation, and motivation is not a reliable fuel source. It peaks and crashes. It appears and disappears. It is available when conditions are favorable and absent when they are not. And conditions are not always favorable. One day, Thomas made a decision that felt almost too simple to work. He decided that the question of whether he felt like it was no longer relevant. Not that he would ignore how he felt, but that how he felt would not determine whether he showed up. The commitment was the commitment, regardless. And something shifted, not immediately, not dramatically, but over weeks and months of acting from decision rather than from feeling. The pattern changed. The momentum that had always been interrupted by emotional weather became something more solid, more consistent, more like the foundation of something real. James Allen wrote that circumstances do not make the man, they reveal him. And what Thomas's experience revealed was not a change in his circumstances. It was a change in what was running his life. He had moved from being governed by his feelings to being guided by his decisions. And that shift, as quiet and as invisible as it was, changed everything that followed. Now let's talk about where the unstoppable mind is actually built. Because most people are waiting for the big moment, the dramatic test, the crisis that will finally reveal whether they have what it takes. But that is not how it works. The unstoppable mind is not built in the big moments. It is built in the small ones. In the ordinary, unremarkable, completely unglamorous moments that nobody applauds and nobody even notices. Getting up when the alarm goes off, not because you feel rested, not because the morning feels inviting, but because you said you would. Finishing what you started, not because it is still exciting, not because the momentum is still there, but because you do not leave things half done. Saying no to what weakens you, not because it is easy, not because you do not feel the pull of it, but because you know what it costs and you have decided it is not worth paying. Each of those decisions, individually, seems almost too small to matter. But they are not small. They are the building material of the most important structure you will ever construct. Your character. James Allen wrote that the body is the servant of the mind, but what he also understood was that the mind itself is the servant of its habits, and that habits are built not in the extraordinary moments, but in the repetition of ordinary ones. Think about a wall being built brick by brick. No single brick makes the wall, but without each individual brick, there is no wall. Your internal strength works exactly the same way. No single morning where you got up when you did not feel like it makes you unstoppable. But without each of those mornings, without the accumulated weight of all those small decisions made in the right direction, there is nothing to stand on when the real tests arrive. And the real tests always arrive. Not as a scheduled event, not at a time when you have prepared and feel ready, but in the middle of ordinary life, when you're tired and uncertain and the path forward is not clear. And in those moments, what you have is exactly what you built in the small ones. Nothing more, nothing less. There was a woman named Caroline. She had always told herself that she was the kind of person who showed up when it really mattered, that the small stuff was not important, that she would rise to the occasion when the occasion required it. And then the occasion arrived. A real one. Something that mattered deeply, that required everything she had. And she discovered something that she had not expected. She did not rise to the occasion. She fell to the level of her preparation. Not because she lacked the desire to perform, she had plenty of that, but because the habits that perform under pressure are the habits that have been practiced in the absence of pressure, in the small moments when there was no particular reason to push, no audience to impress, no immediate consequence for taking the easier path. She had been saving herself for the big moments. but the big moments are built entirely from the small ones. James Allen wrote that the oak sleeps in the acorn, and what Caroline discovered was that the oak she had been waiting to become in the dramatic moment was supposed to have been growing in the ordinary ones all along. Now let's talk about the most dangerous enemy you have. And it is not outside you. It lives in your head. It knows your voice so well that it speaks in it. It knows your patterns, your weaknesses, your most convincing justifications, and it uses all of them against you with a precision that nothing external ever could. It is the voice that tells you to rest when you should be working. The voice that says it is not worth it when you're closest to a breakthrough. The voice that reminds you of every time you tried before and it did not work, every reason the current effort is probably going to end the same way, every logical argument for why today is not the right day. That voice sounds like wisdom sometimes. It sounds like self-awareness, like perspective, like the reasonable part of you that is just trying to protect you from disappointment. But it is not wisdom. It is a habit, a deeply ingrained, endlessly practiced habit of retreating from discomfort, and it has been running in the background of your life for so long that it feels like your own thinking rather than a pattern you developed. James Allen wrote that a man does not attract what he wants, he attracts what he is, and what the person who is governed by that internal voice is someone who has practiced over and over again the art of stopping just before the finish line. The key is not to fight the voice. Fighting it gives it power, feeds it attention, makes it louder. The key is to interrupt it, to notice it, acknowledge it, and then act in the opposite direction before it finishes its sentence. Not because you have convinced yourself it is wrong, but because you have decided that its opinion is not relevant to what you do next. There was a man named Marcus. He had a voice that was particularly loud and particularly convincing. It spoke to him most powerfully in the mornings, in that space between waking and getting up, where the day had not yet made its demands and the comfort of staying still felt entirely reasonable. And for years he listened, not because he was weak, but because the voice was good at its job. It always had a reason that made sense in the moment. Just today, you need to rest. You have been pushing hard. This is sustainable. One morning is not going to matter. But one morning always became two, and two became a pattern. And the pattern became the evidence the voice used to tell him that this was just who he was. The day Marcus stopped arguing with the voice and started simply acting before it could finish was the day everything changed. He did not silence it. He did not overcome it through sheer willpower. He just moved faster than it could complete its argument. Feet on the floor before the negotiation could begin. Body in motion before the comfort of stillness could reassert itself. And over time, the voice got quieter. Not because he had defeated it, but because he had stopped feeding it with the attention of engagement. James Allen wrote that every man is where he is by the law of his being. And what Marcus discovered was that the law of his being had been written by a voice he had never consciously chosen to listen to. And the moment he stopped listening, the law changed. Now let's talk about something that most conversations about mental strength completely miss. The difference between discipline that exhausts you and discipline that sustains you. Because you can be disciplined without being unstoppable. You can build a perfect routine, execute it consistently, push through every resistance, and still feel after months or years of doing all of that like something essential is missing. Like you're a machine running efficiently toward a destination you are not sure you actually chose. That kind of discipline is real, it produces results, but it has a ceiling because it is running on willpower, and willpower is a finite resource. It depletes. And when it depletes, when the tank is empty and the motivation is gone and the results are not appearing as quickly as the effort deserves, the discipline collapses because there was nothing underneath it to hold it up. James Allen wrote that he who cherishes a beautiful vision, a lofty ideal in his heart, will one day realize it. And what he understood was that the vision is not decoration. It is the fuel. The person who knows why they're doing what they're doing, who is connected to something deeper than the habit itself, something that matters at a level below strategy and planning and the rational calculation of costs and benefits. That person has access to a source of energy that willpower alone cannot match. Because purpose does not deplete the way willpower does. Purpose is not a tank that empties. It is a root that goes deeper. And the deeper it goes, the more it holds you up when everything external is pushing you down. Think about the difference between two people doing the same difficult work. The first is doing it because they decided they should, because the logic of it is sound, because the results it is supposed to produce are ones they want. The second is doing it because it is connected to something they cannot imagine giving up. A version of themselves they are committed to becoming. A contribution they believe only they can make. A reason that does not disappear when the work gets hard. Both will show up on the good days. Only the second will show up on the days that feel impossible. There was a woman named Elizabeth. She had been building something for 2 years with impressive consistency. Everything in her approach was correct, her habits were solid, her execution was reliable, and she was completely empty. Not tired in the way that rest fixes. Empty in the way that means something is wrong at a deeper level. One day, she sat down and asked herself a question she had been avoiding. Why am I actually doing this? Not what it will produce, not what it will prove, not how it will look when it is done. Why does this matter to her, specifically in a way that nothing else could replace? The answer, when it finally came, was not impressive. It was not the kind of thing you would put in a mission statement, but it was true. And something about that truth changed the quality of what she brought to the work the next morning. Not her technique, not her strategy, not her routine. The fuel. James Allen understood that the outer life is always a reflection of the inner one. And Elizabeth discovered that the outer discipline she had been maintaining so carefully was hollow because the inner fire had never been properly lit. Once it was, everything she had already been doing started to produce something it had not produced before. Not better results, not immediately, but a different quality of presence. The kind that sustains itself, not because the conditions are right, but because the reason is real. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful practices an unstoppable mind develops. The ability to focus only on what it can control. This sounds simple. It is not, because the pull toward what you cannot control is constant and powerful and disguised as legitimate concern. The economy, other people's opinions, the timing of results that are not arriving as quickly as the effort deserves, the unfairness of circumstances that nobody asked for and nobody can change. All of that is real. All of it deserves acknowledgement, but none of it deserves your primary attention. Because your primary attention is a limited resource, and every unit of it you spend on what you cannot change is a unit you are not spending on what you can. James Allen wrote that the strong, calm person is always loved and respected. And what he understood was that the calmness comes not from the absence of difficulty, but from the clarity of knowing where your power actually lives. Not in the external circumstances, not in what other people do or fail to do, not in the timing of results that are outside your control. In your response, in your next decision, in the quality of thought and action you bring to the part of the situation that still depends on you. Think about the difference between two people facing the same setback. The first focuses on everything that went wrong, everything that was unfair, everything that is now harder because of what happened. They're not wrong. All of those things are real. But their attention is consuming the resource they need to respond effectively. The second acknowledges what happened, feels the weight of it, and then asks one question. What do I do now? Not what should have happened, not who is responsible, not what would be different in a fairer world. What can I do now with what I have from where I am? That question is not resignation. It is precision. It is the unstoppable mind directing its energy to the only place where energy can actually produce something. The present moment, the available options, the next decision. There was a man named Richard. He had built something over 5 years that collapsed in a matter of months due to circumstances almost entirely outside his control. And he spent 3 months in exactly the wrong place. Not grieving. Grieving is necessary and real. But fighting mentally against what had already happened, replaying it, analyzing every point where something different might have changed the outcome, directing enormous amounts of mental energy toward a past that could not be altered. And then one morning he asked himself the only question that mattered. What can I do today? Not to recover everything, not to fix what was broken, not to return to where he was. Just today. What is available to me today? And from that single reorientation, from that shift of focus from what he could not change to what he could still do, something began to move. Not quickly, not easily, not without the ongoing temptation to return to the replay, but genuinely, measurably, in the direction of something real. James Allen wrote that you will be what you will to be. And what Richard discovered was that while he had been directing toward the past, toward the unalterable, was still available to him. It just needed a different direction. Let me leave you with the question that matters most. Who are you when nobody is watching? Not who you are when there is something to prove, not who you are when there's an audience, not who you are when the pressure is external and the consequences of not showing up are visible and immediate. Who are you when none of that is true? When it is just you and the decision and the silence of a moment that nobody will ever know about except you. Because that person, the one you are in those invisible moments, is the real you. Not the version you perform for others. Not the version that appears when there is something at stake externally. The one who exists in the privacy of your own commitment. And the unstoppable mind is built entirely there. In the decisions nobody applauds. In the effort nobody witnesses. In the moments where you could have stopped and nobody would have known and you kept going anyway. Not because of what it would produce, not because of what it would prove, but because you have decided who you are and you are not willing to betray that decision just because nobody is watching. James Allen spent his entire life writing about this. Not the dramatic version of strength, not the kind that announces itself with impressive stories and visible results. The quiet kind, the kind that is built in ordinary moments, sustained through invisible effort, and revealed only when the real tests arrive. And when they arrive, and they always do, the person with that kind of strength does not rise to the occasion. They fall to the level of what they built when nobody was watching. And if what they built is solid, if the bricks were laid carefully in all the small, unremarkable moments that felt too insignificant to matter, then what they fall to is enough. More than enough. Because it was built not for the performance. It was built for the truth. And the truth, held consistently, practiced daily, protected in the private moments where it is most easily abandoned, is the only foundation that actually holds. Start today. Not with a dramatic gesture, not with a public declaration, not with a plan that impresses anyone. With one small decision, made in the right direction, when everything in you wants to go the other way. That is where it begins. That is where it always begins. And every day you make that decision, in the silence, in the ordinary, in the moments nobody sees, you're building something, brick by brick, decision by decision, into something that cannot be stopped, because it was built by someone who refused to stop building it. If this video moved something in you, if something you heard today made you stop and think, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel. There is so much more to explore together. See you in the next one.